The first time they killed Lu Heng, he was 9 years old. The second time, he was 11. They held his head under the river until the bubbles stopped, and then they walked away. And he woke up on the bank an hour later, vomiting water, and he understood, for the first time, that something inside him had decided he was not allowed to die. By the time he was 16, the village had killed him in 43 different ways. He was still 16. He would be 16 for the next 30 years. This is the story of the beggar who could not cultivate, could not age, and could not die, and what he became when he finally stopped waiting for the heavens to let him. This is the story of the man who learned to weaponize death itself. Stone Reed Village sat in the foothills of the Kangwoo Mountains, a half-day's ride from the nearest cultivation sect and 2 days from the nearest city, and like every village of its size in the great Yong continent, it had 3 things: a well, a shrine, and a beggar. The beggar's name was Lu Heng. He had been the beggar of Stone Reed Village since he was 4 years old, which was when his parents had died of the river fever in the autumn of the 18th year of the Tianyuan calendar. They had been simple farmers. They had owed money to the village strongman, a thick-armed butcher named Wang Taiju, and when they died, Wang had taken the farm in payment of the debt and left the boy in the dirt outside the village shrine. The villagers had pitied the boy for a while. The shrine maiden had fed him rice porridge for 3 winters. But the shrine maiden had grown old, and the new shrine maiden was Wang Tieju's daughter, and she did not feed beggars. So by the time Lu Heng was 8, he ate what the dogs left and slept where the dogs slept, and he learned, very young, that a child without a name and without a family was not, in any village in the great Yong continent, considered to be a person. He had a bad spirit root. The traveling cultivator who tested the village children every spring, a foundation establishment disciple from the Heavenly Sword sect, sent on rotation to recruit any boy with a sliver of talent, had held the spirit-testing jade to Lu Heng's chest when he was 7, and the jade had not glimmered. Not even a flicker. The cultivator had pursed his lips and made a small notation in his ledger and moved on. 5-element discordant root, he had written. Asterisk cultivation impossible. Recommended occupation, agricultural labor, asterisk. The note had spread through the village before nightfall. Wang Taiju had laughed for a week. So Lu Heng would not be a cultivator. He would not be a soldier, because his arms were too thin from hunger. He would not be a scholar, because no one would teach him to read. He would be a beggar, and he would die in a ditch before he was 30, and the village would forget him within a season. This was settled, in everyone's mind, by the time he was 9. Then they tried to kill him for the first time. It happened in the 7th month, when Wang Tieju's daughter, the new shrine maiden, a girl of 15 with a vicious mouth, had been caught stealing offering money from the village shrine. She had blamed the beggar boy. The beggar boy did not have an alibi, because no one watched where the beggar boy was. Wang Taiju had taken his butcher's cleaver and walked into the alley where Lu Heng slept and brought the cleaver down on the boy's head. The boy had died. Lu Heng remembered it very clearly. He remembered the cold of the cleaver, colder than the metal had any right to be, and he remembered the wet sound and the white of the moment afterward, the moment he had assumed was the end. He remembered, vaguely, a voice. The voice had been very tired and very kind and very far away, and the voice had said, asterisk no child. Not yet. I am sorry. Not yet, asterisk. Then the boy had woken up 2 days later in the alley with a long, thin scar across the top of his skull and a hunger that he had never felt before, a hunger that was not for food, a hunger he could not name. Wang Taiju had seen him the next morning at the well. The butcher's face had drained of color. The butcher had screamed and run away. Lu Heng had not understood. He understood, slowly, over the next 2 years. The village understood faster than he did. They tested him. They tested him by accident at first. A falling stone from a roof split his shoulder in the spring of his 10th year, and the cut closed in 3 days. Then they tested him on purpose. The wheelwright's son, who was a cruel boy of 12, pushed Lu Heng off the bridge over the Reed River in the summer. and Lu Heng hit a rock, and his ribs broke through his chest, and he lay in the cold water for an hour, and he walked back into the village that night with his ribs whole and his skin smooth. That was when the village began to be afraid. They were not afraid the way villagers are afraid of a tiger, which is a simple fear. They were afraid the way villagers are afraid of a thing that was not in their stories, the way mortals are afraid of a wrongness in the world. They could not name what Lu Heng was. They knew only that the heavens had not made him correctly. Wang Taizhu, having recovered from the cleaver incident, decided that a thing the heavens had not made correctly was a thing that should be corrected. He gathered 5 men. They held Lu Heng under the Reed River until the bubbles stopped. Lu Heng, 11 years old, drowned for 50 minutes. They left him on the bank and went home. He woke at moonrise, coughing, and crawled back to his alley. In the morning, Wang Taizhu saw him at the well, and this time the butcher did not run. The butcher came at him with the cleaver again, and this time it took 6 blows to bring him down, and Lu Heng woke up the next morning, again, in the alley. The village stopped using the well that month. They said the water had soured. By the time Lu Heng was 16, the village had killed him 43 times. He had been drowned, burned, stabbed, strangled. Once, in the winter of his 14th year, the wheelwright had built a small wooden box, and they had nailed him into the box and dropped the box down the old well and filled the well with stones and left him there for 9 months. He had woken in the dark, and the dark had not ended, and he had slept and woken and slept and woken in the dark of the box for 9 months, with his hunger growing and his body unable to die, until the spring rains had loosened the stones, and the well had collapsed and a half-rotted box had floated to the surface of the new ditch the rains had carved. The box had a hole in the side where Lu Heng's hand had patiently worked through the wood, 1 fingernail at a time, for 9 months. When they pulled him out, he was still 16. He had not aged a day. But his eyes were not the eyes of a 16-year-old anymore, and the village had looked at his eyes, and the village had decided, very quickly, that the well was where Lu Heng belonged. They had thrown him back in. This time the box had not held him. He had climbed out of the new well at dawn, hands raw, body whole, and he had walked through Stone Reed Village in the gray morning, past the shrine, and past the butcher's house, and past the wheelwright's. And he had not stopped walking until the village was a smudge on the horizon, and the road in front of him was the road no one in the village had ever taken. He was 16 years old. He had been 16 for what felt like a very long time. He had no name, no family, no spirit root, no money, and no plan. But he could not die, and, for the first time in his life, walking on a road no one in Stone Reed Village had ever cared to walk, he understood that this was not, necessarily, a curse. He was beginning to suspect, a resource. He just did not yet know what to do with it. The voice in the white space, the tired, kind voice that had said "No, child. Not yet," came back to him sometimes, in the long nights on the road that followed. It came back to him most often when he was very hungry, when his stomach had eaten itself for a few days and his head was light. The voice said small things in those moments. The voice said, "You are carrying me. I am sorry. I did not have time to ask." The voice said, "I gave you my Tao because the assassins were 3 breaths behind me, and you were the nearest soul. I gave you the only piece of myself the heavens cannot take back. I am sorry. I am sorry." The voice said, once, very faintly, "Find the man who was my disciple. His name is Shenhua. He lives in the eastern edge of the Kangwu Range. He will know what to do with you." The voice said other things. The voice said Tao of undying and forbidden 3001st, and the heavens fear you because they should, but these meant nothing to Lu Heng yet. He understood only the last instruction. Find Shenhua. Kangwu. Eastern Edge. So that was where he walked. It took him 11 years. 11 years for a boy who could not die, who slept where wolves slept, and ate what dogs left, and was beaten in 72 cities before he learned to keep his head down. 11 years of walking the back roads of the great Yong continent, watching cultivators ride flying swords overhead and feeling, every time, the bitter pull of a thing he was not allowed to have. He saw cultivators kill mortals for amusement in market squares. He saw mortals torture other mortals to be like cultivators. He saw, more than once, a thing his old village had been small enough to hide from him, that the world was not unfair only to Lu Heng. The world was unfair to everyone the heavens had not chosen, and the heavens had chosen very few. In the 11th year of his walking, in the autumn of his 27th year, looking still no older than the 16-year-old he had been when he climbed out of the well, Lu Heng arrived at the eastern edge of the Kangwu Mountains. He found a hut. The hut belonged to an old man with a white beard and a single eye, who sat on the porch of the hut drinking plum wine, and who did not seem surprised to see Lu Heng. The old man looked at him for a long moment with the one eye, and then he sighed, the way a man sighs when something he has been waiting a long time for has finally arrived. The old man said, "So, you're the boy he died for, asterisk." Lu Heng did not answer. The old man said, "Sit down. I'll get you a bowl of rice, asterisk." Lu Heng sat down. The rice was the first hot food he had eaten in 11 years. The old man's name was Shenque. He had been, in another life, the only disciple of a heavenly immortal named Wen, who had been a cultivator of the forbidden Tao, the 3001st Tao, the Tao the heavens had hunted out of existence except for one man, who had been driven across 9 continents and 10,000 years until, in the last moment, fleeing the heavenly Lord Tianyue's celestial assassins, he had thrown the entirety of his Tao into the nearest mortal soul he could find, a 4-year-old boy in a Stone Reed Alley whose parents had just died of the river fever. The heavenly immortal had died 1 breath later. The celestial assassins, finding only a dead body, had returned to the upper realms and reported the Tao of undying extinct. They had been wrong by exactly 1 soul. Shenque told Lu Heng this over 3 bowls of rice. When he was done, he looked at the boy who was 27 and 16 at the same time, and he said, "Your master gave you everything he had, but he could not give you a spirit root that works. So the Tao sits in you and cannot move. You cannot cultivate. You cannot draw power. You cannot become an immortal the way the world's cultivators become immortals. The Tao keeps you alive, and that is all, asterisk." Lu Heng said quietly, "Is there a way?" Shenque looked at him. "There is one way," Shenque said, "but it is a way no man has ever survived for long." "I cannot die," Lu Heng said. The old man smiled, a small, very sad smile. "Yes," he said, "that is exactly why it might work for you." Shenque did not, in the first month, tell Lu Heng the way. Shenque fed him rice and made him sweep the porch and chop wood and carry water from the spring, and at night Shenque made him sit on a stone in the courtyard and breathe. The breathing was not cultivation. The breathing was just breathing. Lu Heng was not patient. 11 years of beatings, drownings, and the slow understanding of his own wrongness had not made him patient. He asked, every night, "When?" And Shenque answered, "Every night, not yet." In the second month, a girl came to the hut. She came up the mountain path on a flying sword. The sword was a thin pale blue, and she landed it on the courtyard stones the way a woman lands a teacup on a table, light, soundless. She was, Lu Heng would later realize, 19 years old. She was, at that moment, the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, because his standards were calibrated to villagers and dogs. Her name was Su Yan. She was Shenque's grandniece, and a foundation establishment cultivator of the Misty Lake sect, and she had come, she said, to bring her great-uncle a jar of pickled plums for the autumn. Shenque received the plums and made her stay for dinner. Over dinner, Su Yan noticed the boy in the corner of the hut who was eating very fast and would not meet her eyes. She asked, politely, who he was. Shenque told her, A traveling boy. I'm teaching him to breathe. Su Lian, who was kind in a way that mortals had stopped being kind by the time Lu Heng was 9, looked at the traveling boy with thin shoulders and the wrong-shaped quiet, and she said, I'll come back next month. Maybe I can teach him too. That was how it began. She came back the next month with a small bag of millet. The month after that with a thicker robe for the winter. The month after that with a book of mortal poems, because the boy had told her, very shyly, that he could not read. She taught him to read. She taught him to read on the steps of the porch in the spring of his 28th year, sitting close enough that he could feel the warmth of her cultivation aura, which was the warmth of a small candle in a cold room. Lu Heng, who had spent 23 years being beaten, drowned, buried, and forgotten, had never sat close to a person who did not intend him harm. He did not know what to do with the warmth. He held very still. Su Lian did not notice the way he held still. Su Lian had grown up in a Misty Lake sect that was, by the standards of cultivator sects, gentle. She did not understand, yet, that the boy on the step had been raised by an entire continent of unkindness, and she was the first crack in it. By the autumn, he was reading mortal histories aloud to her in the evenings. By the next spring, she was sitting close enough on the step that her shoulder touched his. She told him about her sect. She told him about her parents, who were minor cultivators in a small city. She told him about the senior brother in the Misty Lake sect who had asked for her hand and whom she did not want, because his eyes did a thing she did not like when they looked at her. She told Lu Heng things, in those months, that she had not told anyone. She told them, perhaps, because she did not yet understand what he was, and so he was, to her, the safest person in the world to tell anything to. He listened. He read to her. He did not tell her, in that whole first year, that the heavens had broken something inside him. He did not tell her because, for the first time since his parents had died, he had a thing in his life that was good, and he was afraid that if she knew what he was, the good thing would end. It ended anyway. It ended in the second summer. Su Lian came up the mountain in the 7th month with her sleeves dirty and her sword sheathed wrong, and Shun Qua's eye went sharp the moment she landed. She had a bruise on her cheek she had tried to hide with rouge. She would not look at Lu Heng. Shun Qua sent Lu Heng to fetch water from the spring. Lu Heng went, but he did not go far. He crouched behind the pine that grew at the edge of the courtyard, and he listened, because he had spent 28 years learning that information was the only currency a person without a name was allowed to spend. Su Lian's voice was very small. She said, Senior brother Han struck me. The sect master saw it and did nothing. The sect master said it was my fault for refusing the marriage. They've given me a month to agree. If I don't agree, they'll expel me. Shin Qua said, will you agree? Su Lian said, no. Shin Qua said, after a long moment, then you cannot go back to the Misty Lake sect, child. You'll have to come here. You can travel with me to my old sect in the southern continent. They owe me a favor. You'll be safe there. Su Lian said, I cannot leave my parents. The sect master will go after them if I disappear. Shin Qua said nothing for a long time. Then he said, quietly, that is what I was afraid you would say. That night, very late, after Su Lian had gone to sleep in the small back room of the hut, Shin Qua came out onto the porch where Lu Heng was sitting and watching the moon. The old man said, they will come for her. Not next month. Tomorrow night, or the night after. The sect master of the Misty Lake sect is not patient. He will send senior brother Han with 2 core formation elders to bring her back. They will hurt her on the way, and they will hurt me when I try to stop them, because my cultivation is not what it was, and the heavens have a way of taking a man's strength precisely when he most needs it. Lu Heng said, I'll fight them. Shin Qua looked at him. The look was kind. The look was the kindest look Lu Heng had ever been given by a man in his life. The old man said, boy, you are a mortal with a Tao you cannot use. You cannot fight a core formation elder. You cannot fight a foundation establishment senior brother. You cannot, in your current state, fight a strong farmer. Lu Heng said, I cannot die. The old man was quiet. The old man said, no. You cannot. Then he said, but she can. They came the next night. There were 3 of them. Senior brother Han Boyu, who had asked for Su Lian's hand and been refused, and 2 core formation elders of the Misty Lake sect, Elder Liang and Elder Zhao, both gray-bearded, both with the cold, patient faces of men who had decided a long time ago that the heavens favored the strong and that they themselves, therefore, must be very favored. They landed in the courtyard at the 3rd hour of night. Shen Kuo met them on the porch. Shen Kuo, who had been, in his youth, a nascent soul cultivator before a long, quiet decline. Shen Kuo, who had, that night, drunk plum wine for the first time in 20 years and dressed in his old sect robes and stood, one-eyed and small, between 3 men and a sleeping girl. The fight took 11 seconds. Elder Liang killed Shen Kuo with a sword strike that opened him from shoulder to hip. Elder Zhao set the porch on fire. Senior brother Han walked past the burning porch into the hut, and he came back out with Su Lian by the hair. Lu Heng watched from behind the pine where he had been crouched. He did not move. He did not move because Shen Kuo had told him not to. Shen Kuo had said, the night before, in the gravest voice Lu Heng had ever heard a man use. Boy. When they come, and they will come, you will hide. You will hide, and you will watch, and you will live. Because if you reveal yourself, they will take you to the Misty Lake sect, and they will study you. And in 20 years, when they have figured out what you are, they will sell you to the heavenly Lord Tianhua. And then everything your master died for will have been for nothing. Do you understand me, boy? Lu Heng had said, yes. Shen Kuo had said, live. That is what your master gave you. Live. And one day, when you can, repay him. So Lu Heng did not move. He watched senior brother Han drag Su Lian out of the hut by her hair. He watched Su Lian look toward the pine where he was hidden, and he watched her face change when she saw him, and he watched her, deliberately, look away, so that the cultivators would not look. She did not betray him. In the last second before they put her on the flying sword, she mouthed 2 words at the dark behind the pine. Live, Lu Heng. Then she was gone. He found her body 4 days later. She had been thrown off the Misty Lake sect's discipline cliff, which was the cliff the sect used to discipline disobedient disciples. The fall was 1,000 feet onto sharp rocks below. By the time the local townspeople pulled the body up, the wild dogs had been at it. There was not very much of Su Lian left. The Misty Lake sect's official record said she had thrown herself from the cliff out of shame. The townspeople, who had seen senior brother Han carry her up the cliff path the night before, did not say anything. They were mortals. Mortals did not say anything about what cultivators did, because mortals who said things about what cultivators did tended to find their houses burned. Lu Heng walked into the town in the 5th night after he had watched her leave. He did not cry. He had not cried since the well. He bought a small pot of rice wine from a tavern with the last of the coins Shen Kuo had given him, and he walked up to the discipline cliff alone, and he poured the wine over the rocks where the body had been, and he sat on the cliff edge for an hour. He thought, in that hour, about a great many things. He thought about Shen Kuo's sad, kind smile. That is exactly why it might work for you. He thought about a voice in a white space saying, I am sorry. He thought about a girl on a porch step in the spring, teaching a beggar boy to read a poem about plum blossoms. He thought about the well. He stood up. He walked to the edge of the cliff. He stepped off. The fall was 1,000 feet. He hit the rocks where Su Lian had hit. He died for the 44th time in his life. And for the first time, when he woke, the dawn after, broken and reforming on the cold stone, he did not wake into emptiness. He woke into a small, tight, hot point in his chest that had not been there before. A point the size of a grain of rice. The Tao of undying, which had sat dormant inside him for 24 years because his spirit root could not move it, had, when he had thrown himself off the cliff in deliberate grief, moved. Just a little. Just one grain. Enough. He understood, lying there in the dawn cold with his ribs knitting and his blood drying on the rocks, what Shin Qua had meant. He could not cultivate qi. His spirit root would not let him. But he could cultivate death. Every time he died, every time he forced the Tao of undying to do its work, the Tao grew. A grain at a time. A grain that no other cultivator could ever harvest, because no other cultivator could survive the harvest. He thought, very calmly, on the rocks below the discipline cliff. How many deaths to a foundation establishment cultivator? He did not know. He thought, I have time. He stood up. He walked back to the road. He started toward the Misty Lake sect. He had business there. Lu Heng did not, in his foolishness, walk into the Misty Lake sect that week and demand the heads of senior brother Han Boyu and the sect master. He had been beaten enough times by enough men, in enough cities, to know what would happen. He would walk in. They would laugh. Han Boyu would cut him in half. He would, perhaps, wake up 2 days later in a study chamber being vivisected by Elder Liang. And from there, it would be the long, slow horror Shin Qua had warned him about. 20 years of being a specimen, of being studied, of being eventually sold to the heavenly Lord Tianhua. He would not give them that. Not yet. So he went, instead, deeper into the Kangwu Mountains. He went to the place Shin Qua had once mentioned, in passing, as the place where Wuyin, his master, the heavenly immortal who had died for him, had once cultivated. A small cave behind a waterfall in the high pass. He found the cave on the 11th day of walking. The cave was empty. There was, on the wall, a single line of writing, scratched in characters so old Lu Heng could not at first read them. But the Tao inside him moved when his eyes touched them, the way the Tao had moved at the foot of the discipline cliff, and the characters became readable. The line read, "To cultivate the undying, one must spend the only currency the undying has." He sat down in the cave. He took the small kitchen knife he had stolen from a roadside inn 3 days earlier, a knife with a chipped blade, the only weapon he owned, and he set it on the stone floor in front of him. He thought, very carefully, about what he was about to do. He was going to kill himself. He was going to kill himself, and the Tao would bring him back. And then he was going to kill himself again, and again, and again. He would kill himself until the small grain of Tao in his chest became 2 grains, and then 3, and then a handful, and then a fist, and then a sphere, and then, eventually, in a year or a decade or a century, a fully formed dantian of the forbidden 3001st Tao, and a body that the heavens had not built to contain it, but which would be, by the time he was done, the only body in the world that could. He understood, sitting in the cave, that he was choosing to make himself into a thing. He understood that the boy who had read poems on the porch step was a kind of person, and the thing in the cave with the kitchen knife was going to be a different kind of person, and the difference between them would be measured in deaths. He thought about Su Lian, mouthing live from a flying sword. He thought about Shin Qua, who had died one-eyed and small on a burning porch. He thought, I will be a different person. I am sorry. I cannot be the person who reads poems on a porch step in a world that lets things like Senior Brother Han exist. Then he picked up the knife. He set the point against the soft of his throat. He looked at the line of writing on the wall. And he pushed. He died for the 45th time. He woke. He died for the 46th. He woke. He died for the 47th. By the 100th death, his hands had stopped shaking when he picked up the knife. By the 300th, he had moved past the throat, because the throat had become routine and the Tao needed novelty to grow. He died by the heart. He died by opening the great vein in the thigh. He died, once, by holding his breath, which took longer than he had expected and was the most unpleasant of his deaths so far. He died by starvation, when he ran out of food and chose not to leave the cave for 2 weeks, The Tao kept him conscious for the whole 2 weeks, suffering, and when his body finally gave out it took 11 seconds to come back. But the grain of Tao in his chest became, after that death, 2 grains. He was working out the rules. The rules were these. Slow deaths grew the Tao more than fast deaths. Deaths that hurt grew the Tao more than deaths that did not. Deaths that were deliberate, that he chose, in clarity, without flinching, grew the Tao more than deaths that were accidental. Deaths that he survived for the sake of someone else grew the Tao more than deaths he survived for himself. He could not, of course, test the last rule alone in a cave. He filed it away. A year passed. By the end of the first year, the Tao in his chest was no longer a handful of grains. It was a small, dense black pearl, the size of a small plum, and it sat in the center of where his dantian would have been if he had a dantian, and it pulsed, very faintly, with a heat that was not warm. He could feel it doing things to his body that no chi cultivator could match. His bones had become denser. His skin had become harder. His eyes saw better in the dark. His hunger had reduced. He could go a week now without food and feel only mild discomfort. He had, without trying, surpassed the 3rd level of body tempering. He had, without ever drawing a single breath of chi, become physically stronger than most chi-gathering cultivators of the 8th or 9th layer. He did not stop. He died, in the 2nd year, for 100 more times. By the end of the 2nd year, the pearl in his chest had cracked open and become something else. A small, slow-spinning vortex, the color of a coffin's inside. He had reached, without ever cultivating chi, the equivalent of foundation establishment. He did not stop. In the 3rd year, something else began to happen. The Tao began to talk to him. It was not the kind voice of his dead master. It was a colder voice. It was, he eventually understood, his own voice, his own self, refined by 3 years of deliberate death, speaking to the part of him that had once been a boy on a porch step. The voice said, "You are not your hunger anymore." The voice said, "You are not your fear anymore." The voice said, "You can stop, now if you want. You have enough to walk into the Misty Lake sect and kill Han Boyu and walk out. You have enough to kill the sect master if you are clever. You have enough to live a comfortable life in the cultivation world, even, if you wished it, asterisk." The voice said, "Or you can keep going." Lu Heng thought about it for 1 full night. He thought about Su Lian. He thought about Shenhua. He thought about the well, and the box, and the 43 deaths before Su Lian, and the man in the alley with the cleaver. He thought about the cultivators who flew over the back roads on swords and amused themselves by killing mortals in market squares. He thought about the heavenly Lord Tianyue, somewhere in the upper realms, who had hunted his master across 9 continents and 10,000 years and was, even now, presumably content in the belief that the Tao of undying was extinct. He thought, "I can stop here and have a comfortable life." He thought, "Or I can become a thing that makes the heavens take a different kind of breath when they hear my name." He picked up the knife. He did not stop until the 4th year. He walked out of the cave behind the waterfall on the 1st day of his 32nd year. Though his face was still 16, and would always be 16, because the Tao did not allow him to age and never would. He had been in the cave for 4 years and 1 month. He had died, by his own count, 2,147 times in that period. The vortex in his chest had, in the last week of his stay, condensed into a perfect sphere. The sphere was the color of black jade and the size of his fist. By the standards of the cultivation world, he had achieved a kind of core formation. By the standards of the Tao of undying, which had no standards, because there had only ever been 2 cultivators in its entire history, he had achieved something the heavens had no name for yet. He felt, walking out of the cave, the way a man feels after a long illness. Hollow, slightly cold, older inside his bones than he was outside of them. He had, when he walked into the cave, been a beggar with a curse. He walked out a different thing. He walked out, his first morning, into the rising sun. The light hit his eyes. He took one breath of cold mountain air. He flexed his right hand, slowly, and the air around the hand twisted, faintly, the way air twists in heat shimmer above a stove. He smiled. It was not the smile of the boy on the porch step. It was a very thin, very patient smile. The smile of a man who had finally, after 28 years, become capable of doing something about the world that had made him. He walked down the mountain. He had business with the Misty Lake sect. The Misty Lake sect sat on the southern shore of a lake the color of jade, in the foothills of the Kangwoo Mountains, with white pavilions and a sect gate of black stone, and a sword forest of 3,000 swords planted point down in the gravel of the outer courtyard. It was a mid-tier sect by the standards of the great Yong continent. 3 core formation elders, 1 nascent soul ancestor, mostly retired, who came out of seclusion only for major sect events, and roughly 400 disciples ranging from body tempering to early foundation establishment. It was, in other words, a fortress for the kind of cultivator who was strong enough to terrorize a region and weak enough that no major sect bothered to remove them. Lu Heng walked up to the sect gate at the second hour of afternoon. He was wearing a plain gray robe he had bought from a traveling merchant for 3 copper at the foot of the mountain. He carried no sword. He had no cultivation aura at all. The Tao of Undying did not project the way Qi cultivation projected, and to the gate disciples on duty, Lu Heng read as a mortal. A young one, by the look of his face. A beggar, by the look of his robes. The gate disciples, who were 2 outer disciples at the early stage of Qi gathering, laughed at him. The taller one said, "Run along, beggar. The sect doesn't take beggars, asterisk." The shorter one said, "Unless you'd like to be a beggar of the sect. We have a very nice well for beggars, asterisk." Both of them laughed. Lu Heng looked at the taller one. The taller one stopped laughing, because Lu Heng's eyes did something the gate disciple did not understand. The shorter one was still laughing when Lu Heng moved. What happened next, several Misty Lake disciples would, in later years, describe in different ways. The taller gate disciple would describe it as the beggar's hand passing through me like wind. The shorter would describe it as the moment I understood that I was a mortal pretending to be a cultivator. A vendor across the road, who had a clear view, would later swear that the beggar had simply touched both of them on the chest with 2 fingers, and that both of them had folded to the ground like sheets of paper. Both gate disciples were dead before the second one's laughter finished. Lu Heng stepped over them and walked through the gate. The next people to see him were 3 inner disciples, foundation establishment cultivators, sparring in the outer courtyard. They turned when they saw him. They did not see, at first, the dead disciples behind him at the gate. The disciples had folded so neatly that the bodies were not yet obvious. They saw only a beggar walking into their courtyard with his hands at his sides. The senior of the 3 drew his sword. Lu Heng did not slow his walk. The senior shouted something, perhaps a challenge, perhaps a warning, the witnesses would later disagree, and rushed forward with his sword raised. He was a foundation establishment cultivator of the 7th layer of Qi gathering before his foundation, which was the standard level for an inner disciple of his age, and his sword strike was a clean overhead cut aimed for the beggar's collarbone. The cut did not land. Lu Heng caught the sword. He caught it in his bare hand, fingers around the blade, the way a man catches a falling chopstick. The senior disciple stared at the beggar's hand on his blade for 1 second, and then, very slowly, his blade began to bend, not from the beggar's strength, from something else. The blade was bending, the senior disciple would later realize, because the air around the beggar's hand was consuming it, eating the qi in the blade, eating the structural integrity of the metal, eating, in fact, a tiny percentage of the senior disciple's own cultivation through the hand on the hilt. The Tao of Undying did not merely keep its host alive. The Tao of Undying ate other Taos. That was the thing the heavens had hunted it for. The sword crumbled. The senior disciple's right hand crumbled with it, bones turning to powder where they had touched the hilt. and the senior disciple began to scream, and Lu Heng silenced him with a touch to the throat, and the senior disciple folded like the gate disciples had folded. The other two inner disciples ran. Lu Heng let them run. He had things to do, and they were not the things he had come for. He walked into the central pavilion of the Misty Lake sect at the 3rd hour. By the time he reached the central pavilion, the entire sect was alarmed. Bells were ringing. Disciples were pouring out of the inner halls. The 3 core formation elders had been summoned from their seclusion chambers. The nascent soul ancestor was being woken from his usual afternoon nap, an indignity he had not suffered in 7 years. Senior brother Han Boyu was standing at the top of the central pavilion steps when Lu Heng arrived. Han Boyu had grown, in the 4 years since Lu Heng had last seen him, into a tall and broad-shouldered man of 26. He had reached the middle stage of foundation establishment. He wore the white robes of an inner disciple of high rank, and he was, by all the markers the cultivation world used, a successful young man. He was, also, the man who had dragged Su Lian out of a hut by her hair. He did not recognize the beggar at the foot of the steps. He shouted, in the voice of a man who had decided early in life that volume was a substitute for authority. Asterisk, who are you? Identify yourself, or be cut down. Asterisk. Lu Heng looked up at him. Lu Heng said, very quietly, asterisk, senior brother Han. Do you remember a girl named Su Lian? Asterisk. The blood left Han Boyu's face. The 4 years of comfort, the rise to middle foundation establishment, the white robes and the rank and the small belt of authority, all of it was, in that one moment, peeled away from Han Boyu's face, and the face underneath was the face of a man who had, for years ago, committed an act he had successfully not thought about since, and who was, in this courtyard, on these steps, being asked about it by something he could not place. A beggar's face. A child's face. A face he was certain he had seen once, somewhere, a long time ago, in the doorway of a small hut, in a girl's parting glance. He drew his sword. He shouted, kill him. The 3 core formation elders, who had just arrived at the top of the steps, moved without hesitation. They were Elder Liang and Elder Zhao, the 2 who had killed Xinhua, and Elder Jiang, who had not been at the hut, but who was the most senior of the 3. All 3 were in the late stage of core formation. All 3 were, by Lu Heng's old standards, terrifying. They attacked together. It took Lu Heng longer to deal with them than it had taken him to deal with the gate disciples. It took him almost a full minute. He killed Elder Liang first, because Elder Liang was the one who had killed Xinhua. He did it by letting the elder's sword pass entirely through his chest, which, the elder discovered to his immediate confusion, did nothing, and then by reaching forward, slowly, and laying his palm on the elder's forehead, and drinking the elder's core. The core came out of Elder Liang's dantian through Elder Liang's eyes, 2 thin black streams of cultivation, and pooled in Lu Heng's palm, and was gone. Elder Liang collapsed, mortal and weeping, on the steps, and his hair, in the next 12 seconds, went entirely white. Lu Heng did not let him die. He left Elder Liang collapsed on the stone, mortal, 84 years old in 12 seconds, his cultivation gone forever. He killed Elder Zhao second, by a slower method that the witnesses afterward would refuse to describe. He did not kill Elder Jiang, because Elder Jiang had not been at the hut. He simply touched Elder Jiang on the forehead, lightly, the way a man touches the head of a child, and Elder Jiang's cultivation came out of him the way the others had, and Elder Jiang fell to the floor of the steps in his old man's body and did not get up. He turned to Han Boyu. Han Boyu had run. Han Boyu had run a distance of approximately 20 steps before he had stopped, because his legs had refused to carry him further, because his foundation establishment cultivation had taken one look at what the beggar had just done to 3 core formation elders and concluded, very rationally, that there was no point. Lu Heng walked up to him. The whole courtyard had gone silent. For 100 disciples were watching from the walls, the towers, the pavilions, the courtyards. The nascent soul ancestor, a small, bent man in saffron robes, had appeared at the top of the central pavilion, but he had not moved. The nascent soul ancestor was a wise man. The nascent soul ancestor had felt the Tao around Lu Heng and had concluded, in 3 breaths, that intervention would shorten his retirement to roughly 4 more seconds. Lu Heng stood in front of Han Boyu. He said, "Do you remember her?" Han Boyu said, with his teeth chattering, "Please." Lu Heng said, "Do you remember her face when you pulled her out of the hut?" Han Boyu said, "Please. Please. I was ordered to. The sect master ordered me. I didn't want to, asterisk." Lu Heng said, "Do you remember her face when you threw her off the cliff?" Han Boyu began to weep. Lu Heng said, conversationally, asterisk, "She mouthed 2 words at me from your sword." Han Boyu, "Did you know that? Did you know there was a boy hiding behind a pine, watching you carry her away? Did you know that, while you were busy being important, a beggar boy was learning the words Su Lien wanted spoken at the end?" Asterisk. Han Boyu shook his head. He could not speak. Lu Heng said, asterisk, "The words were live, Lu Heng. She wanted me to live. So I lived, asterisk." He raised his hand. He said, "I'm going to teach you to live too." He did not take Han Boyu's cultivation the way he had taken the elders. He did something else. He placed his hand on Han Boyu's chest, very gently, and he reached into Han Boyu's dantian, and he did not extract the cultivation, he froze it. He locked it. He sealed it shut, so that Han Boyu would still feel it, still know it was there, still be able to sense the chi inside himself. But he could never, ever draw on it again. A mortal cultivator. The worst kind. A man who could feel his strength every moment of every day, for the rest of his very long life, and could not touch it. Then Lu Heng said, asterisk, "You will go down the mountain. You will go to the city at the lake's southern shore. You will become a beggar. You will sleep in alleys and eat what dogs leave, and you will not, under any circumstance, kill yourself. Because if you kill yourself, I will know, and I will be." Han Boyu, very disappointed, asterisk. He pressed his fingers, briefly, against Han Boyu's forehead, and a small black mark. A mark only Lu Heng could see, but Han Boyu would feel for the rest of his life, settled on the skin between Han Boyu's brows. "If you try to die," Lu Heng said, asterisk, "the mark will keep you alive. The same way I am kept alive. The mark is a small piece of my Tao. You will know what it is like, Han Boyu, to want to die and to be refused. You will know it for 100 years, asterisk." Han Boyu, on his knees, began to make a sound that was not crying and was not screaming and was a thing the witnesses would later say they had never heard a man make before. Lu Heng walked past him. He climbed the steps to where the nascent soul ancestor stood at the top of the pavilion. The ancestor, small, bent, in saffron robes, with eyes that had seen 400 years of the cultivation world's small cruelties, bowed to Lu Heng. He said, asterisk, "Young friend. The sect master who ordered the girl killed died of a stroke last winter. There was no justice. I am sorry, asterisk." Lu Heng looked at him. The ancestor said, calmly, asterisk, "I will not fight you. I am 400 years old, and I am very tired. If you wish me to die, I will sit down here and die. If you wish me to dissolve this sect, I will dissolve it. The disciples here are not the disciples of 4 years ago. Most of them have not killed. A few of them have. I will give you their names if you want, asterisk." Lu Heng was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The names." The ancestor gave him the names. There were 11. Lu Heng walked through the Misty Lake sect for the next 2 hours and visited each of the 11, and each of the 11 received a different fate, scaled to what they had done. The 2 who had laughed when Han Boyu came back from Shun Kwa's hut, with Su Lian's body slung over a sword, those 2 received the Han Boyu treatment. The 5 who had merely watched and said nothing, those 5 lost their cultivation and were sent down the mountain as mortals. the four who had actively helped cover up the truth of Su Lian's death. Those four received slower treatment, in private chambers, of a kind the surviving disciples afterward did not describe to anyone, ever, even to their own children. When Lu Heng was done, he walked back to the central pavilion. The nascent soul ancestor was still waiting at the top of the steps. Lu Heng said, "The rest may live. Tell them the Misty Lake sect is to be renamed. It will be the Su Lian sect, and in the central pavilion you will put a small shrine, and on the shrine you will write the name Su Lian, and beside it the name Shen Kuo, and beside both of them the name Wuyin. Every disciple of this sect will burn incense at this shrine on the first day of each month, for as long as this sect exists. The ancestor bowed. Lu Heng said, "If you disobey, I will know. I will know because I will visit, in 50 years, to see how the shrine is kept. The ancestor said, "I will see it done, young friend. I swear it on what cultivation remains to me." Lu Heng said, "Good." He turned to leave. He was at the gate of the sect when a voice behind him said, in the bright, clear tone of a woman who had been waiting a long time to speak, Senior. Wait, He turned. It was a young woman. She had come down from one of the towers during the slaughter and was now standing in the courtyard with her sword sheathed and her hands in the long sleeves of her robe. She wore red. Her hair was tied back in a high knot with a silver pin. She was, Lu Heng would have said if he had been the kind of man who said such things anymore, beautiful, in a sharp, hot way, like a brazier in a cold room. She was, by her aura, mid-foundation establishment. She was not, by her bearing, afraid of him. Lu Heng said, "Yes?" She said, "My name is Ling Yu. I'm not of this sect. I'm a guest disciple of the Phoenix Flame sect of the Southern Continent, here on 3 months assignment. I watched what you did today, He said, and she said, "I would like to come with you." He looked at her. He said, after a moment, "Why?" She said, "Because I am 21 years old, and I have been told for 15 of those years that I am not allowed to be the things I want to be. I would like to be in the company of a man who, at least for one afternoon, decided not to be told. He said, "You don't know what I am." She said, "No. But I know what you did to Elder Zhao, and I know that Elder Zhao struck my mother once at a sect gathering 10 years ago, and I have spent 10 years wishing someone would do to him what you did. So I do not need to know what you are. I need only to know that you are going somewhere, and that I would like to be going there too. He looked at her for a long moment. He thought, briefly, about saying no, about walking on alone, about the boy on the porch step, who would never have walked with anyone. He thought about Shen Kuo's voice, on the porch the night before the burning. One day, when you can, repay him. He thought, perhaps, that walking alone forever was not necessarily the only way to repay anyone. He said, I am going to the Southern Continent. To the Phoenix Flame sect, in fact. I need to ask them a question. Ling Yu's mouth did a small thing that was not yet a smile. She said, "Then we are going to the same place, senior." He said, "Not as senior." She said, "As what then?" He said, after a long pause, "Lu Heng." She said, Ling Yu. As I said, She fell in beside him, and they walked out the gate of the renamed Su Lian sect together, and the disciples on the walls watched the strange boy in the gray robe and the red-clad cultivator woman walk away down the mountain road, and not one of them ever forgot the sight. The road to the Southern Continent was 1,000 miles long. It took them 6 weeks, because Ling Yu refused to fly her sword the whole way. She had her reasons. She told them to him on the 7th night, when they were camped beside a small river, and she had been quiet for 2 days. She said her flying sword had been a gift from her grandfather, a Foundation establishment elder of the Phoenix Flame sect, who had died 3 years ago in a clan struggle she had not been allowed to witness. She said the sword burned a certain kind of chi when it flew, and the chi had a signature, and the signature could be tracked by anyone in the Phoenix Flame sect who knew how to look. She said she did not, yet, want her former sect to know where she was. Lu Heng said, "You are running." Ling Yu said, "I am taking a long walk in a direction I have not been told to walk." He looked at her across the fire. He said, "Why are you going back to a sect you were running from?" She said, asterisk, "Because they have something of mine. And because they have something of yours, asterisk." He said, "Something of mine?" She said, asterisk, "Your master was named Wuyin. You said so once, in your sleep, 3 nights ago. I will pretend, for both of our sakes, that I did not hear you say it. But I will tell you this. The Phoenix Flame sect's forbidden library has a single scroll about a heavenly immortal named Wuyin. The scroll has been there for 2,000 years. The sect master has spent the last 7 of those years studying it. He believes it is the key to a thing he wants. I think you would like to know what is on the scroll, asterisk." Lu Heng was quiet. Then he said, "How do you know this?" Ling Yu smiled, and the smile was the first real smile he had ever seen on her face. It was a thin, sharp, very tired smile. She said, asterisk, "Because I am the sect master's youngest daughter, Lu Heng. I am the one who was in the Misty Lake sect not as a guest disciple, but as a punishment. The sect master sent me there for refusing to read the scroll for him. I would not read it because my grandfather, before he died, told me never to read it. And I would not read it because I knew, the moment my father told me what it concerned, that the man it concerned was the only man on this continent worth not being told what to do for, asterisk." He stared at her. He said, "You have been waiting for me." She said, asterisk, "I have been hoping for you since I was 15 years old. When my grandfather told me, before he died, that one day a boy would walk out of nowhere with an old Tao in him, and that boy would burn the sect that had killed him. My grandfather, Lu Heng, was the disciple of a man named Shen Qua. Did your old man on the mountain ever speak of a junior named Ling Bai? Asterisk." Lu Heng went still. Shen Qua had spoken of a Ling Bai once. The night of the plum wine, the night before the burning, Shen Qua had said, asterisk, "I had one junior who learned anything from me. He went south to the Phoenix Flame sect and married into their lineage. His granddaughter, if she lives, will recognize you. Find her, asterisk." Lu Heng had forgotten this until now. He said, "Your grandfather was Shun Qua's junior." Ling Yu said yes. He said, asterisk, "You knew. The whole time. At the Misty Lake sect, you knew, asterisk." Ling Yu said, asterisk, "I knew the moment I saw the way you looked at Han Boyu. My grandfather told me how you would look at a man, like you were measuring how long he had been allowed to live by mistake, asterisk." She poured him a cup of tea from the small pot they had set on the fire. She said, asterisk, "I have been waiting, Lu Heng. I would like to stop waiting. I would like to be useful, asterisk." He took the cup. He drank. He said, quietly, "Then let's go burn your father's sect." The Phoenix Flame sect was a different beast from the Misty Lake. It was the second largest sect on the southern continent, with 11,000 disciples, 12 core formation elders, 3 nascent soul ancestors, and, at its head, a soul severance cultivator named Ling Zhuofan, who was Ling Yu's father. Ling Zhuofan had ruled the sect for 40 years with a hand that the southern continent's other sects had agreed, very quietly, to leave alone. He had spent the last 7 of those years obsessed with a single scroll in his forbidden library, a scroll that, if read correctly, would tell him how to capture and bind a host of the forbidden 3,000 first Tao. He had been waiting for such a host to surface for 7 years. He had not been waiting for the host to come to his front gate. Lu Heng and Ling Yu walked up the sect's outer road on the morning of the 8th week, just past dawn. The Phoenix Flame sect's gates rose 3 stories tall, made of red lacquered wood with the sect's Flame Phoenix emblem in beaten copper, and the gate guards were not, this time, 2 Chi gathering boys. The gate guards were a pair of Foundation Establishment seniors, and behind them, in the shadow of the gate arch, a core formation elder, who had been informed of the approaching pair an hour before by a sect divination matrix that pinged on certain chi signatures. The elder stepped forward when Lu Heng was 20 paces from the gate. The elder said, "Halt. Identify yourselves." Ling Yu said, "Father knows me." The elder, who recognized her, paled. The elder said, "Young Mississippi. Your father has issued a kill order for you." I am required to, Ling Yu said, "I know." She drew her sword. The elder, who had taught her swordsmanship as a child, looked at her with a sadness that was, in the Phoenix Flame sect's culture, considered weak, and looked at Lu Heng with a colder appraisal, and concluded, in the way core formation elders sometimes did when faced with a mortal-looking man, that he was missing information. The elder said, slowly, "Young friend. What are you?" Lu Heng said, "Step aside, elder. You taught the young miss her sword. I would prefer not to take what your students gave you." The elder looked at him for one more second. Then the elder bowed and stepped aside. The two Foundation establishment seniors at the gate, seeing this, also bowed. They had not survived 20 years in the Phoenix Flame sect by being slower than their elders. Lu Heng and Ling Yu walked into the sect. The Phoenix Flame sect did not, as a whole, surrender quickly. Ling Zhuofan was not the kind of sect master who allowed his subordinates to bow. The deeper they walked into the sect, the more disciples arrived to stop them. By the time they reached the third courtyard, Lu Heng had absorbed the cultivation of 4 core formation elders and 73 Foundation establishment disciples, a feast he had not been able to allow himself before, but which here, with Ling Yu's silent consent, she did not flinch once, for which he made a note. He did not refuse. The black sphere in his chest grew. It cracked in the fourth courtyard. It cracked into a small, dense, slow-spinning structure that the cultivation world called a nascent soul, though Lu Heng's nascent soul was the color of nothing and pulsed with the heat of a thing the heavens had not authorized. He stood, for a long moment, in the fourth courtyard, while his body adjusted. Ling Yu stood next to him, sword in hand, watching the surrounding disciples decide whether they dared approach. None of them did. When Lu Heng opened his eyes again, the iris had gone from black to a color that did not have a name in the cultivation world's color vocabulary. It was the color of a star that had collapsed inward. He said to Ling Yu, "Where's the forbidden library?" She said, "Through the inner sect, past the Hall of Ancestors, in the cliff at the back of the mountain. My father will be waiting there, He said, "Good." They walked on. They were stopped, in the 7th courtyard, by a woman. The woman was not of the Phoenix Flame sect. She wore green and silver, the colors of the verdant bone sect of the far western mountains. She was, by her aura, mid-core formation. She was kneeling, in the 7th courtyard, on a pad of red silk, with her wrists bound behind her in a thin silver cord that, Lu Heng could see, was a binding artifact of moderate quality. She was, by her face, perhaps 25 years old. She was, by every measure, the second most beautiful person Lu Heng had seen in his life. The first had been Su Lian. The thought arrived unbidden. He did not let it stay. The woman did not look up at the sound of their footsteps. She had been kneeling on the red silk for some time. The men of the Phoenix Flame sect had been ordered, the day she had arrived as a diplomatic guest of her elder cousin's sect, to walk past her without acknowledging her existence. She had been on the red silk for 14 days. She had not eaten in 4. Ling Yu stopped. Ling Yu said, "Mu Qingxue." The woman raised her head. Her eyes were the green of a forest in shadow. Her face had thinned. Her mouth, very slightly, twisted into the smile of a woman who had been waiting to be useful for a long time. She said, Ling Yu. "You came back, Ling Yu said, "I came back with company. Are you ready to leave?" Mu Qingxue said, "Free me from this cord, and I will be ready to do many things." Lu Heng knelt. He laid one finger on the silver cord. The cord, which was an artifact at the level of a nascent soul cultivator's binding, turned to powder under his touch. Mu Qingxue rolled her wrists. She looked up at him. She said, stranger. Who are you? He said, Lu Heng. She said, and what are you, Lu Heng? He said, whatever I need to be. Are you with us? She looked at him for one long moment. Her smile sharpened. She said, I have been on this silk for 14 days at the order of a man named Ling Zhuofan, who promised to take my sect apart unless my elder cousin sent his most useful daughter to be his concubine. I am the most useful daughter. I am, in fact, the heir of my elder cousin's faction. I have been waiting 14 days for a reason to remove the man who put me here. You appear to be such a reason. Yes, Lu Heng. I am with you. She stood. Her legs shook. She steadied. She picked up, from the silk where it had been placed at her side as an additional humiliation, her own confiscated sword, a long, slender green jade blade that, the moment it was in her hand, pulsed with the qi of a sect Lu Heng had never heard of and would, by sundown, know a great deal about. The three of them, the boy with the dead emperor's Tao, the red-robed fire cultivator who had been waiting for him all her life, the green-eyed sect heir who had been kneeling on red silk for 14 days, walked toward the 8th courtyard together. Ling Zhuofan was waiting in the forbidden library. He had cleared it of every disciple. He had brought no elders. He stood, alone, in the great central chamber, beside a long stone reading table on which a single scroll had been unrolled. He was a tall, gaunt man with a long beard the color of iron, and his soul's severance aura filled the chamber the way smoke fills a closed room. Choking, oppressive, slow-killing. He had drawn his sword. The sword was a pale gold long blade with the phoenix flame insignia on the pommel, and it had a name, Yangrong, which it had earned by killing 9 soul severance cultivators in a tournament 50 years ago. He looked at his daughter. He looked at the green-eyed hostage who was not supposed to be walking free. He looked at Lu Heng. He said, in the voice of a man who had decided to dispense with theatrics, so. The scroll was right. You exist, Lu Heng said, I do. Ling Zhuofan said, surrender. Submit to binding. Spend the next 1,000 years in my sect's foundation stone, and I will leave my daughter and the verdant bone heir alive. Resist, and they die in front of you. He raised his free hand. 2 small jade tablets in his palm glowed. Kill talismans, linked to the cultivations of Ling Yu and Mu Qingxue, set to detonate their cores from the inside the moment he willed it. Lu Heng looked at the tablets. He looked at Ling Zhuofan. He said, calmly, you read the scroll. Ling Zhuofan said, yes. Lu Heng said, then you know what I am. Ling Zhuofan said, I know what the heavens called you. The 3001st Tao. The Undying. I know that a man with your Tao can absorb other Taoists through his deaths. I know that one such man, 4,000 years ago, climbed from mortal to heavenly sovereign in 7 decades, and the heavens themselves descended to seal him beneath 9 mountains. He smiled, a thin, hungry smile. He said, I also know what the scroll does not tell you. I know how to keep you a slave. He activated the kill talismans. The 2 jade tablets flashed. Ling Yu and Mu Qingxue, on either side of Lu Heng, gasped and clutched at their chests. Lu Heng moved. He did not move toward Ling Zhuofan. He moved toward Ling Yu first. He laid his hand on her chest, and the Tao of Undying, which had grown, in the last hour, to a nascent soul of a quality the cultivation world had no scale for, reached into Ling Yu's dantian and held the talisman's poison in stasis. He did the same, in the next breath, with Mu Qingxue. He could not destroy the talismans. They were artifacts of soul severance cultivation, and his Tao did not yet operate at that level. But he could pause them. He could pause them for as long as he kept his attention on them. He could pause them, with the level of focus he had right now, for perhaps 4 or 5 minutes. 5 minutes. He turned to Ling Zhuofan. He said, 5 minutes. He smiled. He smiled in the way the boy on the porch step would not have smiled. He smiled in the way the thing that had walked out of a waterfall cave smiled. He said, let's see how many times I can die in 5 minutes, sect master. What happened in the next 5 minutes? The phoenix flame sect would, for the rest of its existence, refuse to put in writing. Lu Heng began by walking toward Ling Zhuofan with no weapon and no defense. Ling Zhuofan cut him down with one strike. He died. He woke. He walked forward again. Ling Zhuofan cut him down again. He died. He woke. He walked forward again. The soul severance cultivator was, by the third repetition, beginning to understand that something was wrong. By the eighth, the chamber was getting dark, because the Tao of Undying, every time it brought Lu Heng back, was eating a small piece of Ling Zhuofan's Tao through the proximity of their fight, the way a fire eats the air in a sealed room. By the 15th death, Ling Zhuofan was sweating. By the 30th, his sword was shaking. By the 60th, his soul's severance cultivation had crumbled, layer by layer, back through nascent soul, back through core formation, back through foundation establishment. By the 80th, Ling Zhuofan was a qi-gathering cultivator of the 5th layer, on his knees, weeping. By the 100th, and this was about 4.5 minutes in, Ling Zhuofan was a mortal man with white hair and an old man's body, and the cultivation he had built over 112 years was a small, dense, black pearl in Lu Heng's left palm. Lu Heng swallowed the pearl. His own nascent soul, in his chest, spasmed once and then settled, denser, brighter, a touch wider. He had advanced, in 5 minutes of dying, perhaps one full substage of his unnamed Tao. He turned, in the last 15 seconds, and reached toward Ling Yu and Mu Qingxue. He drew the talisman's poison out of their cores, slowly, gently, the way a man removes splinters, and crushed both jade tablets in his palm. Both women, after a moment, opened their eyes. Ling Yu said, Lu Heng. He said, yes. She said, that was the worst. What is your face doing? Mu Qingxue, more practical, walked past Lu Heng and Ling Yu toward the long stone reading table, where the scroll was still unrolled. She picked it up. She read. After a moment, she looked up. She said, Lu Heng. You should read this. The scroll did not say very much. What it said was this. The heavenly sovereign Tianyue has, in the 7th Aeon, declared the 3001st Tao unclean. Any host of the Undying is to be hunted. The reason given to the lower heavens is that the Undying corrupts cultivation. The true reason, known only in the highest chambers of the 9 heavens, is that the Undying is older than Tianyue. The Undying is older than the heavens. The Undying is, in fact, the original Tao, the one from which all 3,000 acknowledged Taos were severed. A host who masters the Undying does not merely cultivate. A host who masters the Undying can reabsorb the other 3,000 Taos. A host who masters the Undying can, in time, devour the heavenly sovereign Tianyue and replace him. Tianyue knows this. Tianyue is afraid. The first host, for 1,000 years ago, was sealed beneath 9 mountains because Tianyue could not kill him. The most recent host, the one called Wuyin, was driven across 9 continents and 10,000 years and finally cornered in a place called Stone Reed Village in the Kangwu Range. There the host was struck down, but Tianyue's assassins reported that the body was empty of Tao. If the Tao escaped into a mortal vessel, and if that vessel has, against all expectation, lived long enough to begin cultivating the Undying, then Tianyue's reign is, at last, finite. Do not let him learn. Do not let him learn until the host is strong enough to face him. Lu Heng read the scroll twice. He set it down. He looked at Ling Yu, who had stepped close. He looked at Mu Qingxue, who was watching him with a level, calculating gaze. He said, then he will learn soon. The deaths in this chamber today, that much Tao consumption in 5 minutes, will register in the 9 heavens within days. Mu Qingxue said, then we have days to disappear. Lu Heng said, or we have days to prepare. Ling Yu said, to prepare for what? He smiled, the small, very thin, very patient smile. He said, for the assassin he will send. They did not disappear. They went, instead, north. They went to a small, unnamed mountain valley in the wild lands between the southern and central continents, where Mu Qingxue's family, the Verdant Bone sect, owned a defensive estate, an old retreat from the last continental war. The estate had been abandoned for 60 years. Mu Qingxue knew the seals. They settled there. They were not alone for long. In the first week, Mu Qingxue's grandfather, who had been her warden in the Verdant Bone sect, and the only relative she trusted, arrived with a small contingent of Verdant Bone elders, having received her sealed message via a sky bird and decided, against the consensus of his sect's council, that the granddaughter was worth following. He brought a nascent soul cultivator of the late stage, a core formation healer, and 3 foundation establishment disciples loyal to Mu Qingxue. He brought, also, news. The Phoenix Flame sect had splintered after the death of Ling Zhuofan, and the southern continent was already shifting around the rumor that something had come out of the Kangwu range and reduced a soul severance cultivator to a mortal in 5 minutes. The rumor was, by the end of the 2nd week, traveling north. In the 4th week, the first messenger arrived. He was not a celestial assassin. He was a senior disciple of an obscure sect in the central continent, sent by a coalition of mid-tier sect masters who had heard the rumor and wished, very politely, to offer alliance. The terms of the alliance were ridiculous and Lu Heng dismissed them, but he listened to the messenger first, learned the names of the sect masters, and decided, internally, which of them he would visit later. In the 7th week, the 2nd messenger arrived. This one was a nascent soul cultivator from the eastern continent, sent by an old hidden sect that claimed lineage from a disciple of Wuin's. They had a gift, a Tao sealing talisman from the original Heavenly Immortals personal stores, which had survived the 10,000-year hunt by being buried under a mountain. The talisman, Lu Heng was told, could conceal the Tao of Undying from any heaven-sensing array for 1 full month. He accepted it. In the 9th week, the 3rd messenger arrived. She did not announce herself. She came over the wall of the estate at the 3rd hour of night, in a black robe and a half-mask of pale gold, and she crossed the inner courtyard without setting off a single ward, which should have been impossible. The wards had been set by Mu Qingxue's grandfather, a late-stage nascent soul cultivator with 400 years of arraycraft. They had not been set, however, against a Tao treading cultivator of the celestial order. The wards did not even register her. She walked, that night, into Lu Heng's private chamber. He was sitting up in bed reading, because he did not sleep much anymore. He looked at her. She looked at him. She said, in a voice that was clear and very cold, the Heavenly Lord Tianyue has issued your sentence. I am to deliver it. Lu Heng said, and you are? She said, Yanshishua, of the Celestial Bureau, Department of Sentencing, Black Plum Division, Lu Heng said, sit down, Yanshishua. She did not sit. She drew the long, thin blade from her sleeve, a heaven-forged blade the color of moonlight, and she crossed the room in one breath, and she put the blade through the center of his chest, and his heart stopped, and he died. He woke up 9 seconds later. She was still there. She had not moved. She was watching, with the patient face of a professional, to see if the rumor was true. She saw it was. She put the blade through his chest again. He died. He woke. He smiled at her. He said, conversationally, I'm told I can do this for a while. She killed him 11 times in the next 20 minutes. She tried different techniques. A celestial flame strike, a soul-binding seal, a Tao severance blade that should, in theory, have reaped his Tao directly from his nascent soul and left the body empty. None of them held. The Tao of undying, older than her Taos, older even than the celestial techniques her bureau used, simply ate every attack she made, the way the sea eats a thrown stone, with a small heat shimmer of consumption around the point of impact. On the 12th attempt, she stopped. She stood in the middle of the chamber, breathing slightly harder than she had been when she entered, with her blade lowered, and she looked at the boy on the bed who had been dead 12 times in 20 minutes, and who was looking at her now with the small patient smile that was, by this point in the story, his only expression. She said, "I cannot kill you." He said, "No." She said, "Tianyue will be displeased." He said, "Yes." She said, "I am required, in the event of failure, to fall on my own blade rather than return." He said, "I would prefer you didn't." She looked at him. She said, "Why?" He said, "Because I need information about Tianyue, and you have it. And because, in 20 minutes of trying to kill me, you did not flinch once. People who do not flinch are useful to me. Asterisk." She was quiet for a long time. Then she sheathed her blade. She said, "My clan was destroyed for harboring a Tao of undying host. 200 years ago, the host was Wuyin. Tianyue burned the entire Yin clan, 6,000 souls, for one night of shelter. I was 3 months old. A retainer hid me in a corn jar. I was raised by the Celestial Bureau, who told me my clan had betrayed the heavens, and I have spent 200 years of life being a very good black plum. Asterisk." She looked at him. She said, "You are the second host of the undying I have met. The first was a body. He was on a stone slab. The Bureau used his bones to forge my blade. Asterisk." She drew the blade halfway from the sheath. The blade glowed, very faintly. It was, Lu Heng now realized, made of a substance that was not steel. It was made of a substance the same color as his own nascent soul, and it pulsed, very faintly, in time with the thing in his chest. She said, "I think, perhaps, the heavens have not been telling me everything." He said, "Yin Shishua. Sit down. There is, by my count, 6 hours until dawn. I think you and I have a great deal to talk about." Asterisk. She sat down. Yin Shishua did not, in the first night, switch sides. She listened. She asked questions. She left, at dawn, by the same window she had come through. She returned, 3 nights later, with a request to verify a few things in the archives. She returned, 7 nights after that, with a list of names. The names were of Celestial Bureau operatives stationed in the lower continents, sent over the past 7 years to investigate anomalous longevity rumors. The names included 3 operatives currently within 100 miles of the estate. She returned, 3 weeks after that, with the head of one of them. She said, dropping it on the table at the morning meal. He was a tail. He was going to report the estate's location. I disposed of him. Mu Qingxue said, "Welcome to the household, Sister Yin." Ling Yu said, equably, "We were going to need a 4th at the table anyway." Yin Shishua looked at Lu Heng. She said, "I have not yet decided I am here, Lu Heng." He said, "That's fine. Decide when you decide. We have a long time." She looked at him for a long moment. Her expression did not change, but she sat down, and she stayed for breakfast. The 4 of them, Lu Heng, Ling Yu, Mu Qingxue, and the slowly defecting celestial assassin Yin Shishua, spent the next 2 years in the estate, and Lu Heng spent those 2 years preparing for the war he had now decided to fight. His cultivation had reached, by the end of the first year, the soul severance realm. By the end of the second, he was at Tao treading. He had stopped, somewhere in the middle of the first year, killing himself. The Tao had reached the point where simple death no longer fed it the way it had in the cave. Now it grew through other means, through the absorption of Taos he encountered in battle, through the consumption of cultivators sent to capture or kill him, These had begun to arrive more frequently after Yin Shishue's first kill list, and through the quiet daily practice of a kind of meditation Yin Shishue taught him, which she had learned in the Celestial Bureau, and which was, she explained, the only way to refine the deepest sublayer of any Tao. She was teaching him, in other words, to be a Tao-treading cultivator the proper way. The cultivator world's way, adapted to the strange thing in his chest. He was, by all measures, becoming something the cultivation world had no clean category for. He was, also, though he did not name it this way, and the three women did not press him on it, becoming a different kind of man. It was in the third year, in the late summer, that the heavens descended for the first time. They did not descend for him. They descended for Mu Qingshue's grandfather, who had been quietly running couriers for Lu Heng for 2 years, and whom Tianyue had decided to make an example of. A celestial commander, a true immortal of the lower heavens, appeared in the courtyard of the estate at noon, in robes of golden cloud pattern, with 12 heavenly soldiers behind him, all of them mortal immortals. The commander announced, in the formal voice of celestial decree, Verdant Bone Elder Mu Yuanxing. By order of the Heavenly Bureau, you are sentenced to soul erasure for the crime of harboring an unclean Tao, Mu Qingshue's grandfather, who had not yet, that morning, met the cultivator who would die saving him, stepped out of the back garden with his sword drawn. He was a late-stage nascent soul. The commander was a true immortal of the lower heavens. The fight would have taken, by any measure, 3 breaths. Lu Heng stepped between them. He did not draw a weapon. He had not drawn a weapon in 2 years. He looked at the true immortal commander. He said, leave the old man. I am the one you came for. You were not sent because you knew I was here. You were sent because the Bureau hoped I would intervene. Well, I am intervening. The commander looked at him with the calm dismissal of a man who outranked a Tao-treading cultivator by 3 full realms. The commander said, mortal child, step aside, or I will obliterate you with the old man, Lu Heng said, very softly, no, commander. You will not obliterate me. You will discover, in the next 30 seconds, that you cannot. The fight took 31 seconds. The commander struck first. A pillar of golden lightning descended from the open sky and consumed Lu Heng's body entirely. There was, briefly, no Lu Heng. There was a column of light and a smell of ozone and a faint, almost gentle whisper of the Tao of undying being inconvenienced. Lu Heng reformed 3 breaths later, 3 paces to the commander's left, in the same gray robe. He laid one hand on the commander's chest. He drank. The true immortal of the lower heavens, a being of 2,000 years of careful cultivation, ranked 34th in the Black Plum Division's threat tables, became a small, dense, black sphere in Lu Heng's palm in 11 seconds. The 12 heavenly soldiers, who had been advancing, stopped. Lu Heng looked at them. He said, you may leave. Tell your bureau that the lower heavens are no longer a safe place to send true immortals. The 12 heavenly soldiers, mortal immortals all, bowed in the air and fled, and the sky above the estate slowly returned to its usual color. Mu Qingshue's grandfather sat down hard on the courtyard stones and looked at Lu Heng for a long, silent moment. Then he said, with great care, young friend, I am 400 years old. I do not say this lightly, but I think it is time I called you something other than young friend, Lu Heng said, whatever you like. The old man said, I think, if it does not displease you, I shall call you ancestor. He bowed. Lu Heng did not stop him. He understood, by then, what the bow meant. He understood, by then, what he had become. That night, the night after his first true immortal, Yin Shishue came to his chamber for the first time without the pretense of a report. She sat down across from him. She said, I have decided. He said, decided what? She said, that I am here. That my answer is yes. that, for the next 10,000 years or however long this takes, I am Yin Shishue of the household of Lu Heng, and that the Celestial Bureau will get its head back only after every other piece of itself has been disassembled first. Asterisk. He looked at her. He said, "That is a long time, Yin Shishue." She said, asterisk, "I am 200 years old. I have time. I want to use it on this." Asterisk. She paused. She said, asterisk, "I also want, eventually, to be allowed in this chamber, the way Ling Yu and Mu Qingxue are. If you have no objection." Asterisk. He was quiet for a long time. He said, eventually, "No objection." She did not smile. She nodded once and rose and left. The next morning at breakfast, when Yin Shishue took the fourth seat at the long table that Mu Qingxue had ordered placed in the back garden, neither Ling Yu nor Mu Qingxue commented. They had already, between them, settled the question of how the household would function. Both of them had agreed, in private, 3 months earlier, that any woman who could stand the four of them daily was a woman who had earned her seat. The household, then, had 4 chairs. It would, in another year, have 5. The fourth woman, and the household's eventual bridge to the upper realms, arrived in the 7th year of the estate's life, in a season that was not, strictly, a season at all, because the seasons in the Wild Valley had begun to behave strangely around the growing density of Lu Heng's Tao. But that part of the story is for the next act. Lu Heng reached Tao treading mid-stage in the 5th year. He reached Tao treading peak in the 6th. In the 7th year, in late autumn, a season the estate's valley had decided to celebrate that year by producing red leaves the color of fresh blood and a wind that did not blow so much as consider. Lu Heng's body began, on its own, to ring like a struck bell. Every morning when he woke, the air around him made a small chime. The chime got louder by the day. By the end of the 2nd week, it could be heard from the outer wall. By the end of the 3rd, it could be heard from the next valley. Yin Shishue, who had spent 200 years in the Celestial Bureau and who knew the signs, said quietly one morning, asterisk, "It's tribulation. The big one. Immortal ascension, asterisk." Mu Qingxue said, "How long?" Yin Shishue said, asterisk, 3 days. Maybe 4, asterisk. Ling Yu said, after a long silence, "Will it kill him?" Yin Shishue said, asterisk, "Tribulation of immortal ascension kills 9 out of 10 Tao treading cultivators. Of the survivors, half are crippled. It is the heaven's last serious chance to remove a candidate before they leave the lower realm jurisdiction, asterisk." She paused. She said, asterisk, "But Lu Heng cannot, by nature, be killed. So the heavens, I think, will not be trying to kill him. The heavens will be trying to seal him. Lock his cultivation. Trap him in this realm forever, asterisk." Mu Qingxue said, "Can we help him?" Yin Shishue said, "No." Ling Yu said, "Can we watch?" Yin Shishue said, "If we stay close, we will probably die." Ling Yu said, "I asked if we could watch, sister." Yin Shishue said, after a long moment, asterisk, "Yes. We can watch, asterisk." They prepared. The tribulation came on the morning of the 3rd day, exactly as Yin Shishue had said. The sky above the estate went black. Not cloud black. Black. The black of a sky that the heavens themselves had cleared of every other color so that the lightning that was about to come down could be seen from the top of the 9 heavens. The wind died. The chime in Lu Heng's body stopped. He walked, in a plain gray robe. He had not changed his robe style in 7 years on principle. Out into the center of the courtyard, and he raised his face to the black sky. The first bolt fell. It was not lightning. It was a column of pure heavenly law, a thing that, when it struck Lu Heng, did not burn or shock or kill, but instead reached into the structure of his Tao and attempted to rewrite the rules of it. It tried, the way a man tries to edit a scroll, to insert clauses into the Tao of undying. Clauses that would limit its growth. Clauses that would bind it to a single body. Clauses that, in essence, would make Lu Heng's Dao no different from any other cultivator's Dao, bounded, taxable, controllable. Lu Heng, in the column of law, was perfectly still. The Dao of undying, the original Dao, the one from which the 3,000 had been severed, refused the edits. The column of law broke first. The heavens tried, then 7 more times. Each attempt was a different mode. The third was a soul-piercing strike that should have severed the Tao from the host body. The fifth was a celestial seal that would have locked the Tao in stasis for 10,000 years. The seventh was an attempt to summon the dead Wuyin's soul from the cycle of reincarnation and use it as a counter-anchor to deny Lu Heng the claim to the Tao. The seventh attempt was the closest the heavens came. For one breath, Lu Heng's Tao flickered. For one breath, his face, the 16-year-old face he had worn for 30 years, sagged, as if something inside him had been pulled, and a voice that was not his and not his alone said, very faintly, no. He is my heir. Let him have what I died to give him, The seventh attempt collapsed. The eighth attempt did not come. The black sky cleared, slowly, into a normal afternoon blue. Lu Heng was still standing. His robe was gone. The tribulation had not, in the end, killed him, but it had not been kind to fabric. His skin was the color of fine white jade. His hair was the color of his old self at the roots and pure star-collapse color at the tips. His eyes, both irises, were now the same impossible non-color his nascent soul had been 7 years ago, but brighter, denser, like 2 small-held suns of nothing. He had ascended. He was, by every measure of the cultivation world, a mortal immortal of the lower heavens. He had achieved it without a master, without a sect, without a single chi cultivation textbook in his life. On the back of a Tao the heavens had spent 4,000 years trying to erase, in 7 years of preparation in a wild valley estate that had no name. The household celebrated quietly. There was no banquet. Lu Heng did not like banquets. There was, instead, a small dinner in the back garden. Lu Heng, Ling Yu, Mu Qingxue, Yin Shixue, and Mu Qingxue's grandfather, who had become a permanent resident of the estate and who had, in the past year, begun referring to Lu Heng publicly as the ancestor in a way that no one corrected. Halfway through dinner, a small bell rang at the front gate. It was the estate's outer ward, the one set against unannounced visitors. It rang only for a particular kind of visitor, someone of immortal rank, who had arrived without being escorted. Yin Shixue rose first. Mu Qingxue rose second. Lu Heng said, sit. I'll go, He walked, in his new pale jade body, in a fresh gray robe Ling Yu had laid out for him that morning, to the front gate. The woman at the gate was a true immortal. She wore white, not robe white, the deeper white of celestial cultivation, the white of a star a long way off. Her hair was the same white. Her eyes were the silver of cold metal. She was, by her aura, mid-tier true immortal, and she had come, by the look of her travel-stained sleeves, a long way. She bowed when Lu Heng opened the gate. She said, heir of Wuyin. My name is Bai Lingsha. I have come from the lower heavens, from the sect of the Jade Pavilion, and I am here, in defiance of 3 heavenly sovereign decrees, to ask you for sanctuary, Lu Heng looked at her. He said, sanctuary from what? Bai Lingsha said, sanctuary from the heavenly sovereign Tianyue. He has decreed that all true immortals of the lower heavens must report Wuyin-related signals to the Bureau. I have known, for the last 60 years, of a small estate in a wild valley where Wuyin-related signals had been collected. I did not report. I was discovered last week. I have come down to die at your gate, or to swear to you. I have no preference, Lu Heng said, why did you not report? Bai Lingsha said, because my grandfather, the founder of the Jade Pavilion, was given his cultivation by Wuyin. Wuyin saved my grandfather from a Tianyue purge 8,000 years ago, and my grandfather swore on his blood that the Jade Pavilion would never bend to Tianue's bureau in matters of the undying. The oath has passed down 4 generations. I am the 4th. I am also the last, because my grandfather and my father are both dead and the Jade Pavilion has fractured. There is no Jade Pavilion left to take me back. There is only you. Asterisk. He looked at her for a long moment. She did not look away. He said, quietly, Asterisk, the household has 4 seats, Bai Lingsha. It can have 5. If you take the 5th, you do not leave it. Asterisk. She bowed lower. She said, Asterisk, ancestor. I have not been part of a household in 200 years. I would prefer not to leave it. Asterisk. He stepped aside. He said, then come in. Bai Lingsha, white spirit sand, became the 5th chair at the long table in the back garden the next morning, and she did not, in the months and years that followed, ever attempt to leave. She was, of the 5, the calmest. She had the bearing of a woman who had spent 200 years on a high mountain learning patience because there was nothing else to do. She was, Lu Heng came to understand, the only one of his women who had never been hurt by a man, in any sense of the word, and so the only one whose love for him was not, in some small part, a structure built from the rubble of a worse love that had come before. This made her, in a way that surprised him, his anchor. The other 4 had loved him because he was the answer to a specific pain. Ling Yu because her grandfather had spent 20 years waiting for him. Mu Qingxue because she had been on a silk pad in a courtyard for 14 days. Yin Shixue because the bureau that had taken her clan had also given her 2 centuries of lies. They loved him truly. He did not doubt this, but they had loved him from somewhere. Bai Lingsha had loved him from a clear morning. He noticed, very quickly, that the household, which had been a balanced 4, adjusted its weight around Bai Lingsha the way a long table adjusts around a 5th diner. They were, in the months that followed, more themselves. Ling Yu laughed louder. Mu Qingxue began to leave her sword in its rack at meals. Yin Shixue, who had not played a single instrument in 200 years, took up the guqin she had owned as a child and began to play it again, badly at first, then less badly. Lu Heng watched it all from the head of the table, and on the morning of the 3rd month of Bai Lingsha's tenure, he caught himself smiling. Not the thin, patient smile of the man who had walked into the Misty Lake sect, but a different smile, a smile he had not made since the porch step with Su Lian. He thought, for the first time in 9 years, I did not become only what they made me. It was a small thought. He held on to it. He would need it, later, at the top of the 9 heavens. The household ascended together. This is not a thing the cultivation world had ever seen before. Ascension to the upper realms is, by every recorded tradition, a solitary event. A cultivator passes their tribulation, their body refines into immortal flesh, and they cross alone, by the strength of their own Tao, into a higher heaven. Lu Heng was not, by this point in the story, interested in tradition. He spent 2 years, after Bai Lingsha's arrival, refining a technique that would let him carry the 4 women through ascension on the back of his own Tao. The technique was not, strictly, a cultivation technique. It was a binding of his Tao to theirs, a partial sharing of the undying. Not enough to make them immortal in the way he was immortal, but enough to let them ride the ascension current beside him without being torn apart by the celestial pressure. Yin Shixue, who knew the celestial mechanics better than any of them, said the technique should not be possible. Bai Lingsha, who had grown up in the Jade Pavilion's library, said the technique had been theorized once, in a single scroll, by a cultivator named Wuyin, who had never been allowed to try it. Ling Yu said, then we'll be the first to try it. Mu Qingxue said, more practically, and the 2nd through the 5th. They crossed in the spring of the 10th year. The lower heavens, the mortal-immortal realm, was the size of 3 continents stacked above the lower world, suspended in a pearl-colored sky, with cities of white stone and rivers of molten silver and forests in which the trees were each 1,000 years old and considered, by the inhabitants, to be the youngest things on the realm. The household arrived in the central market of the largest city, Cloud Vault, through a tear in the sky that no one had ever seen close. They arrived together, in a small group, with their Tao signatures bound, and they walked out of the market square with a calm that surprised the mortal immortals of Cloud Vault, who had been told by the local heavens that an extremely dangerous individual would be arriving, and who had not been told he would bring 4 women with him, as if they were going on a market trip. Lu Heng did not stay long in the mortal immortal realm. He had business higher up. He bought, in his first week, a small jade pavilion in the city, using a payment he extracted from a true immortal merchant who had attempted to overcharge by Lingsha for tea, and he installed the household there. Then, leaving the women to settle, he went, alone, to the central tribulation tower of Cloud Vault and triggered his next ascension. The tribulation of true immortal ascension was, by tradition, a private affair. It took place inside a sealed pillar of celestial law, with no observers. Lu Heng went in at noon. He came out at dusk. He was a true immortal. He went back to the pavilion. He ate dinner with the household. He triggered the next ascension 3 months later. He was, at the end of 3 months, a golden immortal. He triggered the next ascension 6 months after that. By the end of his first year in the upper realms, he was a peak golden immortal. He had advanced, in 1 year, what most upper realm cultivators advanced in 2000. The household watched. They did not panic. They had, by then, seen worse. The 4 of them had seen Lu Heng grow at the impossible pace of his Tao for 10 years, and they understood that the pace was the natural rate of a Tao that ate other Taos. Bai Lingsha, who had grown up in the politics of the upper realms, was the first to point out, calmly over tea, that Lu Heng's rate of cultivation had now been noticed by the 9 heavens. She said, Tianyue will summon you within the year. He will pretend, at first, that the summons is a welcome. He will offer you a seat on the Bureau of Immortal Affairs. He will praise your cultivation. He will, while you sit in the audience chamber, attempt to use the audience chamber array to bind you. Lu Heng said, and when the binding fails? She said, then he will be afraid for the first time in 8,000 years. And then, depending on what he finds in your face, he will either grovel or attack. Lu Heng said, which do you think? Bai Lingsha said, I think Tianyue does not know how to grovel. I think he will attack. Lu Heng said, then I will be ready to receive him. The summons arrived in the 2nd year. It was a celestial decree, a scroll of gold and white silk, delivered by a heavenly sovereign's herald on a flying tortoise, with all the pomp of a state document. The decree summoned the honored new golden immortal, Lu Heng of the lower heavens, to the throne hall of the 9 heavens, for the purpose of receiving recognition and entering imperial service. Lu Heng read the decree. He looked at Bai Lingsha. He said, we were right. She said, yes. He said, will you all come with me? Mu Qingxue said, yes. Yin Shishue said, yes. Ling Yu said yes. Bai Lingsha said yes. He said, good. The throne hall is, as I understand it, large enough. The throne hall of the 9 heavens sat at the top of the highest mountain of the highest celestial continent, and it was, by every measure, the most beautiful structure in the known multiverse. Its pillars were each 3,000 feet tall and carved from a single jade. Its roof tiles were made of crystallized lightning. Its floor was a polished basin of star stuff in which a man could see his own future if he looked into it from a certain angle, though most men who looked saw, instead, only their own death, repeated. The heavenly sovereign Tianyue sat on the throne at the back of the hall. He was not, as Lu Heng had half expected, a monstrous figure. He was a tall, handsome man of perhaps 30, with long black hair and a face that had been described in 8,000 years of celestial poetry as the face of kindness made permanent. He wore the robes of state, purple, with cloud pattern, with the 9-stroke phoenix at the chest. His cultivation was, by the metrics of the upper realms, immeasurable. His Tao, Lu Heng could feel as he walked the long aisle, was the Tao of order, the third of the 3,000. A foundational Tao, the kind on which entire realms were built. The Tao of order had been severed from the original Tao, Lu Heng's Tao, at the beginning of the 7th Aeon. Lu Heng's Tao remembered this. Lu Heng's Tao, walking up the aisle, was very quiet, the way a thing is very quiet just before it eats. The 5 of them stopped at the foot of the throne. Tianyue smiled. It was a kind smile. He said, Lu Heng, you have come a long way. I have watched your ascension with admiration. The cultivation world has not produced a golden immortal of your speed in 9,000 years. I have prepared a seat for you. Bureau of Immortal Affairs. Director of the Black Plum Division. Your assistant, he nodded at Yin Shishue, may resume her old position, if she so wishes, with full clemency for her recent insubordination. He gestured. The audience chamber array, the binding array by Lingsha had predicted, woven into the floor of the throne hall, began, very quietly, to activate. The basin of star stuff at Lu Heng's feet began to ripple. Threads of celestial law began to rise from the basin, beautiful and slow, and to weave themselves toward Lu Heng's chest. Lu Heng let them. The threads of celestial law touched the Tao of undying. The Tao of undying ate them. The basin of star stuff at Lu Heng's feet stopped rippling. The array died. The throne hall went very quiet. Tianyue's smile did not change, but something behind his eyes did. Lu Heng said, quietly, Heavenly Sovereign, I have come a long way, but I am afraid I did not come for a seat. Tianyue said, then for what? Lu Heng said, for the throne, Heavenly Sovereign. I came for the throne, Tianyue rose. He did not draw a weapon. He did not need to. His Tao filled the throne hall the way a heavy pressure fills a sealed vessel. Every breath the household had been taking became difficult. Every pillar in the hall trembled. The crystallized lightning of the roof tiles began to spark, gently, as if it were aware that a conversation it should not be witnessing was about to escalate. Tianyue said, Child of Wuyin, I crushed your master across 9 continents. I crushed his master before him. I have crushed every host of the undying since the beginning of the 7th Aeon. I will crush you. The only kindness I am offering, in this moment, is the chance to take the seat instead of the slab. Lu Heng said, no? Tianyue said, then so be it. He raised one hand. The basin of star stuff at the foot of the throne opened into the underside of the 9 heavens, and from that opening rose the full-bound apparatus of Tianyue's celestial bureau, the Black Plum Division, the Jade Bureau, the Heavenly Court of Sentencing. 11,000 celestial cultivators rising at once into the throne hall, weapons drawn, arrays primed. The hall, which had a moment before contained 6 people, now contained 11,006. The 4 women of the household moved without being told. Bai Lingsha stepped to Lu Heng's right and directed a curtain of jade pavilion warding around the household, not to block Tianyue's attacks, which she could not block, but to filter out the lesser celestial cultivators and make the fight bilateral. Yin Shishue, a step to his left, drew her bone blade and made a quiet inventory of the 11,000. Mu Qingxue and Ling Yu took positions at his back, ready to take down anyone the curtain let through. Lu Heng walked forward. He did not draw a sword. He had never drawn a sword. He walked, in his gray robe, up the steps of the throne. Tianyue met him on the 3rd step. The fight was, and this is the part that the chronicles of the upper realms would, in later millennia, struggle to describe accurately, a fight between 2 Taos, with the bodies of the cultivators serving as venues for the actual conflict. Tianyue's Tao of order tried to impose itself on Lu Heng. It tried to declare him an exception, a violation, a thing the heavens had not authorized, and to unmake him on the basis of his unauthorization. The Tao of undying answered by being older. It had been the original Tao. The Tao of order had been cut from it, 8 eons ago, by an act of celestial bureaucracy that Lu Heng's Tao now, with the host's full attention behind it, declared void. The Tao of order screamed. Tianyue staggered. It took, by the timekeeping of the 9 heavens, 16 seconds. By the 17th, Tianyue was no longer the heavenly sovereign. He was a tall, handsome man in purple robes, sitting on the 3rd step of his own throne, weeping, because he had just felt 8,000 years of cultivation depart from his body in a slow drinking pull, and because the man who had drunk it had then, with one fingertip, sealed Tianyue's remaining Tao the way Lu Heng had once sealed Han Boyu's. A mortal in immortal robes. A man who could no longer command the heavens he had built. Lu Heng did not kill him. He stepped past him. He walked up to the throne. He turned. He looked out at the throne hall. The 11,000 celestial cultivators of Tianyue's bureau were on their knees. They had seen, very clearly, what had happened. Word would, in the next 3 breaths, spread through every level of the upper realms. Lu Heng sat down on the throne. The throne, which had been built for the heavenly sovereign Tianyue, adjusted itself to its new occupant. The 9 heavens, every continent, every city, every cultivator court in every realm of the upper realms, acknowledged. He did not say much in the first moment. He looked at Tianyue, weeping on the 3rd step. He said, "You will live, heavenly sovereign. You will live as a mortal, in a small house at the foot of a mountain in the lower world, and every morning when you wake you will remember that you were once the heavenly sovereign of the 9 heavens, and that a stone reed beggar drank you on the 3rd step of your own throne. You will live, in fact, the way you made my master lie for 10,000 years, asterisk." He turned to the 11,000. He said, "You may go. Those of you who have killed for the bureau will be visited, one at a time, over the next 1,000 years. Those of you who have killed many will be visited first. Those of you who have killed few may have very long, very quiet lives, in which I do not appear at your gate. Decide, now, which of those you would prefer to have been, asterisk." The 11,000 bowed. They departed, one by one, in silence, the way the disciples of a sect depart from a banquet that has gone very wrong. He turned to the household. Bai Lingsha bowed. Yin Shishua bowed. Mu Qingxua bowed. Ling Yu, who had never bowed to him in 9 years and did not begin now, smiled. She said, "Husband, the throne suits you, asterisk." He said, "It is too large." She said, "Then we will fill it." She walked up the steps of the throne. Mu Qingxua followed. Bai Lingsha followed. Yin Shishua came last, looking briefly at her old colleagues on their way out the door, and shrugged, the smallest possible shrug, and joined her household. They stood, or sat, or leaned, as the throne permitted, around the new heavenly sovereign of the 9 heavens. In the years that followed, and there were many, Lu Heng ruled the upper realms. He was not, by the standards of the 9 heavens, a soft sovereign. He visited, in the first 1,000 years of his reign, every name he had collected. He visited the Misty Lake sect, now the Su Lian sect, where the shrine had been kept perfectly, and he sat at the shrine for a full day with Bai Lingsha at his side, and Bai Lingsha, who had a gift with the dead, called Su Lian soul gently from the cycle of reincarnation and let her speak with him for 1 hour, and Su Lian's soul, when she saw what the boy on the porch step had become, did not weep. She laughed. She said, "Good." She said, "Read me the plum blossom poem, Lu Heng." He read her the plum blossom poem. Then she went back into the cycle, freely, with a small kiss on his forehead. He visited Stone Reed Village. He stood, for one afternoon, in the alley where he had been beaten and drowned and buried for the first 9 years of his life. He did not, in the end, harm the village. He did not need to. Wang Taizhu had died 20 years before of a stroke, and the new generation of Stone Reed did not know the beggar boy's name. Lu Heng simply rebuilt the village in one afternoon, with a wave of his hand, better houses, a proper well, a small school where any child of the village could learn to read. And then he left, and the villagers, when they woke the next morning, never quite figured out where the new village had come from. He visited Han Boyu in his beggar's alley in the city on the lake. Han Boyu had been a beggar for 13 years by then. Han Boyu had tried, 27 times, to die. Lu Heng's mark had refused every attempt. When Lu Heng appeared at the mouth of the alley, Han Boyu looked up, and his face was the face of a man who had spent 13 years living the life he had taken from Su Lian, and Han Boyu said, quietly, please. Please let me go, Lu Heng looked at him for a long moment. He said, no. Then he reconsidered. He said, but I will visit you, Han Boyu, every century, until I decide otherwise, so that you are not alone, Han Boyu wept. Lu Heng walked away. He did not, in the end, find this kind. He did not know what it was. He left it as it was. In the 4,000th year of his reign, Lu Heng was visited at the throne hall by an unusual delegation. It was a delegation of one, a small old man in a plain robe, with a single eye, who looked very tired and very pleased, and who, when Lu Heng saw him, set down his teacup and rose from the throne for the first time in 2,000 years. The old man said, boy, you look ridiculous on that throne, Lu Heng said, Master, Xin Kuo, whose soul by Lingsha had, 3 months earlier, very quietly retrieved from the cycle and remade, as a small private gift to the household, sat down on the 3rd step of the throne, the same step on which Tianyue had wept 4,000 years before. Xin Kuo said, tell me about Wuyin. Has he come back yet? Lu Heng said, not yet. The cycle does not let go of a heavenly immortal quickly. Xin Kuo said, will you wait? Lu Heng said, I will wait, master. I have time. The old man nodded. He sipped his tea, for which Bai Lingsha had appeared at his elbow with a fresh cup, because she had been listening, and he said, good. Now, read me a poem, boy. It has been a long 4,000 years, Lu Heng smiled. It was the smile of the boy on the porch step. He had not, after all, lost it. He read his master the Plum Blossom poem. Lu Heng ruled the 9 heavens for 10,000 years. He did not become kind. He did not become gentle. He remained, until the end, a man who had been killed 43 times in a stone reed alley before he was 16, and who had built, on the foundation of that boy, a Tao that ate other Taos. But he was not, and this is the part the chronicles of the upper realms had not expected him to be, only that. He read poems to his women in the back garden of the throne hall. He rebuilt Stone Reed Village every 1,000 years, whether it needed it or not. He held, on the first day of each month, a small banquet at the throne hall, at which any cultivator of any realm could attend, free of cost, and at which the only rule was that no one was to bring weapons. The banquets became, over the centuries, the most attended events in the upper realms. He never sat the throne alone. The 5 seats around it, for Lingyu, for Mu Qingxue, for Yin Shixue, for Bai Lingsha, and for one empty seat that, on the first day of every month, was set with a single bowl of plum wine and a sprig of plum blossom, were always filled. The empty seat was for Su Lian, who came back in the cycle as a small mortal girl in the 8,000th year of Lu Heng's reign, and who Lu Heng, by long-standing agreement with the cycle, negotiated over centuries with Bai Lingsha as the intermediary, was not allowed to disturb. He let her live her mortal life. He watched, from far above, and was content. When she was old, and had died of old age in a small house surrounded by grandchildren, the cycle let her soul rest at the empty seat in the throne hall for one night. They spoke. She kissed his forehead. She returned to the cycle the next morning, on her own terms, with a small mortal smile. He did not, after that night, set the seat again. This was the story of the beggar who could not die. He could not cultivate. He could not age. The world that tried to kill him 43 times was the same world that, in the end, made him. This is the lesson of his Tao, the one the cultivators of the 9 heavens still pass down quietly, in the back chambers of their sects, when a young disciple is told they have no spirit root and is sent to tend cabbage on a forgotten cliff. The heavens will tell you what you are. They will be very confident. They will be very loud. The heavens will, occasionally, be wrong. If you are one of those occasions, if the heavens have set you in a stone-reed alley with no name and no spirit root and no future they recognize, do not, please, hurry to die. Wait. Sometimes a beggar is just a beggar. And sometimes, in the right alley, at the right hour, the heavens drop a voice into him that they would have preferred to keep. That was Lu Heng, the undying beggar, the heir of Wuyin, the heavenly sovereign who drank the heavens. If you want more stories from the cultivation world, more villain MCs, more harem, more revenge that takes 1,000 years to land, subscribe. New stories from After What? Tell me in the comments which of the 5 was your favorite. Be careful. They read the comments. Settle in. The next one's already started.